The year is 2025. Imagine you are the supreme military commander of a hostile superpower. You have the tanks, you have the jets, you have 2 million soldiers ready to march. And you've just been given the order to invade Russia. You're confident, you've studied the maps, you've read the history books, and you think you've learned from Napoleon's mistakes and Hitler's failures. You tell yourself, we won't invade in winter, we'll go in summer. Problem solved. You're about to make the most catastrophic military blunder in human history. Because here's what nobody tells you. Winter didn't stop Napoleon, winter didn't stop Hitler, geography stopped them, logistics stopped them, and the same iron laws of physics that crushed 2 of history's greatest military minds will crush you too. Today, we're not talking about snow or frost or general winter. We're talking about the terrifying mathematical reality of why Russia is unconquerable. We're going to break this into 6 parts. The liquid maze that drowns armies, the railroad trap that strangles supply lines, the population black hole where divisions disappear, the scorched earth doctrine that leaves you starving, the nuclear backstop that ends the game, and the historical graveyard where empires go to die. By the end of this, you'll understand why every serious military strategist on Earth knows one simple truth. You don't invade Russia, ever. Buckle up. This is going to be brutal. Let's start with something you can see on any map, but probably never thought about. Rivers. Russia has more rivers than you can count. The Volga, the Don, the Dnieper, the Ob, the Yenisei, the Lena. These aren't streams you can wade across. These are massive liquid highways, some of them over a mile wide, cutting through the landscape like natural moats designed by a paranoid god. Here's the problem. If you're invading from the west, from Europe, you have to cross at least 6 major river systems before you even reach Moscow. 6. And we're not talking about bridges you can just drive over. We're talking about crossing points that can be destroyed in seconds, forcing you to build pontoon bridges under fire while your enemy shells you from the opposite bank. Let me put this in perspective. During World War II, the Wehrmacht, one of the most mechanized armies in history, ground to a halt at the Dnieper River in 1943. They had air superiority, they had artillery, they had some of the best engineers in the world, and it took them weeks to establish a viable crossing while losing thousands of men and hundreds of vehicles. Now imagine you're trying to do that same river crossing, but this time the defending side has drones, precision missiles, and satellite surveillance watching your every move. You're not crossing the Dnieper, you're walking into a slaughterhouse. And here's the kicker. Even if you somehow cross all 6 rivers, you still haven't reached the Urals. You haven't even reached the industrial heartland. You've just spent months bleeding your army dry to capture empty fields and cities you can't hold. But let's pretend you make it past the rivers. Now you face an even darker problem. The distances. Russia is 11 time zones wide. 11. If you stand on the western border and look east, the Pacific Ocean is farther away than the distance from London to Baghdad. The sheer scale is incomprehensible. During Operation Barbarossa, the Nazis advanced 600 miles in the first 3 months. They thought they were winning. They were actually dying in slow motion, because every mile they advanced stretched their supply lines thinner and thinner until they snapped. Remember this number? We'll come back to it. Okay, so rivers are hard and distances are huge. You're smart. You say, we'll use trains. Trains can move supplies faster than trucks. Congratulations, you just activated the trap. Russia uses a different rail gauge than the rest of Europe. While most of the world uses standard gauge, 1,435 millimeters between the rails, Russia uses 1,520 millimeters. That's 85 millimeters wider. You know what that means? Your trains don't fit on their tracks. This isn't an accident. This was a deliberate 19th century defensive strategy. The Russian Empire looked at Napoleon's invasion and said, if they come again, let's make sure they can't use our railroads. So when you invade, you have 3 options. 1, you manually change the gauge of every single mile of captured railway. This takes weeks per section and requires engineers working under constant threat of sabotage. 2, you transfer every ton of supplies from your trains to their trains at the border, creating a logistical bottleneck so massive it's basically a kill zone. Or 3, you rely entirely on trucks. Let's talk about trucks. A modern armored division consumes roughly 500,000 gallons of fuel per day. Per day. If you're supplying that division from 600 miles away, you need a convoy of fuel trucks. But those fuel trucks also need fuel to make the round trip. So you're burning fuel to deliver fuel. The math is horrifying. Military logisticians call this the tyranny of distance. For every mile you advance into Russia, the percentage of your supplies that actually reaches the front line drops. By the time you're 400 to 500 miles in, you're spending more fuel moving supplies than you're delivering to your troops. And what happens when your tanks run out of gas in the middle of the Russian steppe? They become $8 million statues. Monuments to your failure. Hold that thought. It gets darker. Now let's talk about people, or rather, the absence of people. You've probably seen maps of Russia and noticed that it's massive. What you don't realize is that most of it is empty. Truly, horrifyingly empty. Russia has 144 million people living in 6.6 million square miles. That's a population density of about 22 people per square mile. For comparison, the United States has 94 people per square mile. Europe, over 100. But here's the real nightmare. Most of Russia's population lives west of the Urals, crammed into a handful of cities: Moscow, St. Petersburg, Novosibirsk, Yekaterinburg. Once you push past those cities, you enter the void. Imagine you're an invading soldier. You've just fought through hell to capture a town. You're exhausted. You need food, water, shelter, maybe some local supplies. You look around. The town has 5,000 people. There's one grocery store. The infrastructure is 40 years old. There's nothing to pillage, nothing to requisition. You're in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by birch forests and swamps, and the next town is 100 miles away. This is the population black hole. You can't live off the land because there's nothing on the land. You're entirely dependent on your supply lines. And remember those supply lines we talked about? The ones strangled by rivers and railroads and distance? Yeah, they're snapping. Historically, armies conquered by scavenging. The Romans did it. Napoleon tried it. Even the Nazis planned on seizing Soviet grain supplies. But Russia learned. After the Napoleonic Wars, after the Civil War, after World War II, the Russian doctrine became crystal clear. If you invade, we burn it all. Pause. Let me ask you something. If a foreign army invaded your country and you knew you couldn't stop them in a direct fight, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. All right, here's what Russia does. They burn everything. This isn't a metaphor. This is official military doctrine. It's called Scorched Earth, and Russia has perfected it over centuries. When Napoleon invaded in 1812, the Russians didn't just retreat, they torched their own cities. They burned Moscow, an entire capital city reduced to ash just to deny the French shelter. When Hitler invaded in 1941, the Soviets did it again. They evacuated entire factories, dismantled them piece by piece, and moved them beyond the Urals. They blew up dams. They destroyed grain silos. They poisoned wells. Anything the Wehrmacht could use, they obliterated. And here's the thing. Modern Russia has this coded into law. If NATO or China or anyone invades, there are pre-planned demolition protocols for every bridge, every rail junction, every power plant, every refinery. They will blow it all up and disappear into the vastness. You're not conquering Russia. You're conquering a smoking crater. Now imagine you're 6 months into this invasion. Your supply lines are broken. Your troops are starving. You're sitting in a burned-out city 800 miles from home. And then you get the intelligence report. Russia just launched a tactical nuclear weapon at your forward command post. Let's talk about the thing nobody wants to talk about. Nukes. Russia has 6,000 nuclear warheads. That's more than any other country on Earth. And their nuclear doctrine is very clear. If the existence of the Russian state is threatened, they will use them. You might think, well, we have nukes too. Mutually assured destruction, they won't actually fire. You're gambling the survival of your civilization on that assumption. Here's the nightmare scenario. You've just captured Volgograd. Your forces are advancing toward the Urals. Moscow is evacuated. And the Russian president goes on TV and says, "We are prepared to use all means necessary to defend the motherland." What do? If you keep advancing, there's a non-zero chance that a 500 kiloton warhead detonates over your largest troop concentration. If you stop, you've just spent trillions of dollars, lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and destroyed your economy for nothing. This is the nuclear backstop. It's the ultimate insurance policy. Russia might lose every conventional battle. They might lose every city west of the Urals. But the moment you threaten the core existence of the state, the calculation changes, and the price of victory becomes the end of the world. No rational leader takes that bet. That's why the Cold War stayed cold. That's why NATO has never seriously considered invading Russia, because the end game is Armageddon. But let's pretend you're insane. Let's pretend you don't care about nukes. You're willing to risk it all. Surely you can succeed where Napoleon and Hitler failed, right? Wrong. Let me show you why. Let's review the scoreboard. 1812. Napoleon invades with 600,000 men, the largest army ever assembled at that time. 6 months later, fewer than 40,000 make it home. France never recovers its continental dominance. 1941, Hitler invades with 3 million men, the most powerful military machine in history. 4 years later, the Soviets are raising their flag over the Reichstag in Berlin. Germany is split in two for 45 years. You notice the pattern? The empires that invade Russia don't just lose the war, they lose everything. Their economy collapses. Their empire crumbles. Their place in history becomes a cautionary tale. And here's the thing that should terrify you. Both Napoleon and Hitler had advantages you will never have. Napoleon invaded a Russia that was technologically backward, with no railroads, no telegraphs, no modern industry. Hitler invaded a Soviet Union that had just purged its officer corps and was caught completely off guard. You, the hypothetical invader of 2025, are facing a nuclear-armed, technologically advanced, deeply paranoid state that has spent the last 200 years studying exactly how to kill people like you. Russia's entire national identity is built on repelling invaders. It's in their songs, their literature, their monuments. The Great Patriotic War, World War II, isn't just history, it's a sacred narrative. And the lesson of that narrative is simple. We will burn our own country to ashes before we let you take it. Remember that number from earlier? The 600 miles the Nazis advanced in 3 months? That wasn't even halfway to the Urals. They never came close to conquering Russia. They just bled themselves to death trying. So let's bring it home. 1. Geography is a weapon. Rivers, distances, and empty space will kill your army before the enemy fires a shot. 2. Logistics is everything, and Russia's infrastructure is designed to strangle yours. 3. The nuclear backstop. The moment you win, you lose, because the price of total victory is total annihilation. The lesson? Russia isn't unconquerable because of its army. It's unconquerable because the land itself is a fortress, and the people would rather burn it down than hand it over. Napoleon spent an empire learning this. Hitler spent the Third Reich learning this. You can learn it for free. Now, if you think this was brutal, wait till you see what happens when we analyze why China can't invade Taiwan. The math is even worse. That video drops next week. I'll see you there.